Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Artie of the Toronto Jazz Group TuneTown. He talks quite a bit about their latest 2019 CD, There From Here, and how this band formed back in 2015 as three of Canada's top jazz improvisers. Kelly's on the saxophone, Artie's on the bass, and Ernesto is on the drums. The group features original music composed by and for the trio, bringing together three distinct musical voices on material that runs the gamut from intense to sublime, seamlessly assimilating elements from the avant-garde, funk, and jazz worlds. He talks about all of this and so much more, so please get to know him and dig this interview, my friends.
Thank you for taking some time out on behalf of TuneTown to talk to Neon Jazz today. I appreciate it.
You're most welcome.
So let's go ahead and let's talk about your guys' latest album, which is There From Here.
Yeah.
Give me an idea of what you guys were going for with this release.
We were going for essentially a type of album that should or could be listened to sort of straight through from the beginning to the end, if possible. That's kind of what we're aiming for. We also tried to take a jazz trio kind of approach, but at the same time incorporate some modern production techniques. Mainly that took the form of little sort of sonic interludes between pieces. And the other thing we wanted to experiment with was using alternative techniques on our instruments and sort of blending maybe some funk influences, maybe some avant-garde influences, and all sorts of different ways of playing our instruments into the performance and the composition approach.
I've recently interviewed Kneebody and Go-Go Penguin, and I'm thinking about kind of how many bands out there are pushing levels of sonic pleasure to the jazz fans, and it's like the straight ahead, the bop kind of a thing is evolved into these newer sounds, and you're talking about funk and avant-garde and all of those things.
Yeah.
Are those things that you're consciously doing? Is it a part of what you guys' skill set between you, Kelly, and Ernesto, or how is all that coming together?
In terms of, if you're talking about like how different markets will react and how it if it's sort of a preconceived thing, no, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a preconceived thing. All three of us have sort of individual voices. I think at times those things express themselves in our tastes. And I would hazard to say that while we all kind of come out of the mainstream jazz tradition and all kind of have a thorough background in bebop and hard bop and all those sort of styles, we kind of incorporate our own personal influence on it. And I think in doing so, I think the fact that we all come from that root of sort of a standard mainstream training in the music, we hope that all those listeners that are coming from that background can still relate to what it is we do. But we're also hoping that listeners that perhaps are more acquainted with more modern types of things will also hear some sort of reflections of our own time now and what's influencing our writing. I think that answers your question.
Yeah,
sure.
Totally. And what I want to do is I want to step back to 2015 when you guys all came together. Talk to me about the beginnings and kind of the shared vision of music you guys all have.
We are all acquainted with one another up here in the Toronto jazz scene, and all of us are in the scene here. This is a city of 6.5 million now. So it's a fairly vibrant and robust cultural scene generally, not just for jazz, but for theater, opera. We have, I think, 2 full-time orchestras in the city. So it's a pretty vibrant scene here. And Kelly, Ernesto, and I met Kelly, I think, 15 years ago, and I think I met Ernesto about 10 years ago. And all of us were familiar with one another's work and knew one another. And the specific way it evolved is that there's a jazz club up here called the Rex Hotel, and as a bass player and as a leader, I got sort of a residency there. And even though I had my own group, I thought it was time for me to experiment with different combinations of people that I knew just to see what would happen. It is a relatively casual gig, so it was that sort of a situation where I could do that. And one of those combinations I did was I brought Kelly and Ernesto together with me to do one of those gigs, and we all had a really great time. And basically that gig was probably about 5 years ago or so. And we all three of us would kind of run into one another and go, hey, that was a really fun gig. We should do that again. And finally Ernesto kind of picked up the ball and said, hey, we really got to do this, and let's actually each one of the three of us, let's all write a song for this trio, and let's get a project happening. And it was essentially, I kind of got the ball rolling in terms of that one gig, and then Ernesto took the ball himself and kind of created some momentum in terms of let's make a project of this.
What's the future? What's the vision for this band? Are your kids going to take it over? What's going to be the ultimate kind of thing that's going to happen?
I think we're relatively new, and I think the way we're looking at it, we already have like enough material for 2.5 albums. Like we're all sort of furiously writing. So from the creative standpoint, definitely from us, you can expect another release within the next year or year and a half. We're already working on that. Even the third one after that, we're starting to dream up little schemes about it. In terms of travel and exposure and live concerts, that's actually our next step as well, because we've had a pretty active online media campaign through our partners, Slam and Media, which is our label, but also a firm that's down in the States there, Groove Marketing and Consulting, has also been heavily promoting the album. So we're hoping to make it south of the border and visit our American friends and tour around there. And especially we'd love to go to Europe. And of course we always like touring our own country, Canada. So touring, definitely another release within the next year or so.
So let's say you come to Kansas City and you guys have to write up kind of a notice, kind of almost a little bit more of a Twitter-length notice to kind of let people know what you guys do and what you would deliver to a live crowd to kind of sell what you do. How would you describe what you guys do live?
Well, the one thing I think we all do, I think I'm among the more talkative of the three of us, but we talk a lot to the audience. I've always felt pretty strongly the chordless trio in jazz is already a challenging instrumental combination without a harmonic instrument. It's already difficult for listeners to sort of get used to that. So we talk to you, if you're in the audience, we talk to you a lot. We talk to you before each song, usually. Talk about not hyper-technical stuff, just about the kind of emotions and sentiments behind the composition and just, what we're trying to do. As well, we take a lot of time to kind of pass the credit around to all three of us in terms of, talking about the ideas. We just want to invite the listener into the experience. We're by no means kind of in that sort of really quiet and sullen sort of performance kind of style. We're very outgoing people, and we really want to reach people and connect with them and have kind of a reciprocal relationship with the audience where we can meet them and share our music with them.
Well, hey, Artie, thank you for opening up on behalf of the band about the new album, about you guys getting together and your history. I really appreciate your time today.
Hey, man, I really appreciate your interest. Thank you so much for calling and conducting the interview, and I hope that we make it down to Kansas City one of these days. I would love to be there and check it out.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest cats in Toronto, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Artie on behalf of TuneTown for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino on the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.